This is the second part of this week's yoga class, the one that is dealing with standard intermediate yoga poses. If you are not doing this as a continuation of the first part, please take a few minutes to do a little bit of warming up before we get started with our down dog. If you want a more gentle version, then look at the alternative video that starts with the same standing poses we just did, but moves to the chair for the rest of the poses. So we're going to start by going into our down dog, hinging at the hips, planting our hands flat on the floor so the middle finger's lining up with the middle of our shoulders. Stepping back, we want to be back far enough so that we're getting a good stretch to the legs, but we don't want to be so far back that we're up on our toes. And once we get that tailbone pointed up to the sky, we're pressing back with our shoulders down toward our toes, our heart toward our knees, so we don't have any forward movement of the shoulders. It's a straight line from our hands through our shoulders down to our tailbone. Starfish hands, pressing through the first knuckle of the fingers we've had so that we don't have all the weight on our wrist. Then we're going to take this to a plank, pulling the shoulders forward, pulling the shoulder blades in toward each other, and down toward our spine, thinking about pushing down with the head of the femur, or with the tailbone lifting with the head of the femur, so that we don't have any bend through the hip area, neither dropping to the ground nor lifting up. Then into a side plank, shifting our hand toward the midline as we rotate out. We can drop our back knee down to the ground if we feel we want a little more gentle version, or we'll keep that leg lifted, shoulder over hand, other hand up to the sky if we'd like. And then dropping down to the ground on our side. We're going to do a little bit more loosening up to the hip. So we're going to point the toes of our top leg up toward the sky. And once we get lifted as high as we can, we'll do an internal rotation, toes down as we bring the leg back down. Slowly lifting, rotating down. Working with our breath. Next time we lift, we're going to hold the pose. Depending upon how long our arms are, we can hold onto the back of the thigh, the back of the calf, or maybe reach our toes. Each one of us has a different body shape and size, a different physical history, so we will do what we can do to work the muscles without abusing them. But no static pose. We keep working with our breath, trying to see if we can increase the stretch, especially through the hamstring. The harder we push to the heel, the more we get work in the lower leg. And yoga very unique in that it works muscles above and below the knee, inside, outside, front and back. Doing well this time. Slowly lowering that leg to the floor. We're going to straighten out so our elbows in front of our shoulder, our hips, knees, and feet in alignment. Working on our core strength, we're going to lift our top leg and then the bottom leg to meet. So we don't want our legs any higher than we're comfortable with. We can take our front hand and continue to leave it for support in front of our rib cage, or we can lift it up to the side. Working on legs lifting, lifting, lifting. And then dropping our feet to the floor. We're going to work again on shoulder strength by going into our forearm side plank. We're going to drop our arm down on the ground a little bit further forward so that as we shift our weight, we have the alignment of knee and elbow, or shoulder and elbow. Bent knees are going to help us as we move into our core strength, lifting the hips for a straight line from our shoulder through our hip down to our knees. Maybe straightening out our legs a little bit. We can work with the top arm, making circles, swinging it back and forth, or just holding it up, leaving it on our hip, whatever we feel that shoulder needs right now. And then slowly dropping down to the floor. We'll place the weight on our top arm. We're going to take our other arm, turn the palm up toward the sky, and then rotate it so the fingertips are behind us. We're going to shove it straight back out from our shoulder and drop down to the ground. We can leave our knees as bent as we choose to feel stability, but we want to keep the hips even. Top hip directly over the bottom hip as we move. Try to go deeper in the pose. We don't want to be pulling that hip either forward or back. but we can move through the shoulders. If we'd like, we can take that top hand and bring it around, maybe just letting it rest on our hip, reaching to the back of our hips, or maybe even coming all the way back to reach our other arm. Possibility of interlacing fingers, but not necessary, just reaching back as far as we can to maximize the stretch, especially on that lower shoulder. And then bringing the top hand forward. Putting our weight on that hand as we swing our other arm around. We'll use it as a pillow as we bend our hand back underneath our head. We're going to keep our knees bent. And we're going to take this to a cat and cow on our side. So we're going to think, first of all, about working with the lowest part of the sinus, sacral spine, pushing our belly back, pushing our rib cage back, letting our shoulders come closer together as we spread across the upper back, chin into chest. At the same time, we can take that top knee and pull it up toward our forehead. We can bring our hand to rest on the side of our leg or hold onto our foot, either at the ankle or down on the toes, but keeping it no higher than our hip, making sure that it stays hip high, both the knee and the foot. And then coming this into our cow face version, pulling the belly forward, rib cage forward, pulling shoulder blades tight together as we tilt the chin and shove that leg behind us, curling back into our ball. So sacral, lumbar, thoracic, cervical spine. Same thing again, but this time moving forward with the lower torso, belly, rib cage, and then shoulder blades pulling tight behind us as we push the knee back, curling into another ball. Nice slow exhale. And deep inhale as we arch again. And now we'll hold the pose. We're thinking about trying to get a little more length from our pubic bone to our navel, pushing the belly forward a little bit more, pulling our shoulder blades tighter together, gently tilting our head to look beyond our shoulder, and then thinking about pulling that heel further in toward our sit bone, pushing the knee further behind us so we can maximize the stretch to the quadricep on that leg. And then bringing the knees together. We'll roll over on our belly so we can do our Sphinx, strengthening our back. So we plant our hands flat on the floor, our starfish hands, elbows underneath our shoulder. And we think on all back bends that the tailbone is going to move forward, that iliac crest of the hip bowl is going to be lifting up and back. We're going to leverage our hands into the floor to make length through the front of the torso first, before we energize into our forearms. Slowly lift up as high as we can, gently tilting the chin, making sure we can continue to breathe evenly and deeply. And then bringing our hands under our shoulders, pushing up to all fours again. I'm going to turn around for better visibility for you as we do the same poses on the opposite side. So we start by walking our hands at least one hand length in front of our shoulders. We turn our toes under, tailbone pushes up as the belly drops, chin into chest, then we lift the knees and drive backward toward our feet. And again, we don't want to pull the shoulders forward, so we think about taking those shoulders and pushing them down toward our toes. Checking to make sure that the heels of the feet are in alignment with our sit bones, that we can pick up our toes. And then we're going to come forward into our plank. If we'd like, we can drop the knees to the floor. But we still want to watch what's going on with the hips, keeping as straight a line as we can from the tip of our head down through our heels. Our side plank, adjusting our hand as we rotate out to the side. We can lift our hand up to the sky, leave it on our hip. We can drop our lower leg to the floor. And then dropping down. Bending our bottom arm to use it as support for our head if we'd like. We're going to take our top leg and lift it up toward the sky. Rotate it down. So we're working on getting a little more blood, a little more warmth in that hip socket. And the next time we lift that leg, grip of choice, depending on how long God made our arms, and then working on maximizing how much stretch we can get. Can we push a little bit harder through the heel? Can we pull that leg closer in toward our rib cage? Can we straighten out the bottom leg a little bit more? Trying to get an opening deeper and deeper between our legs. Slowly lowering that foot to the floor. Straightening out from our elbow through our shoulder, through our hips. Lifting both legs off the floor. And again, if we feel stable enough, we can take our supporting hand and bring it to our hip. If we feel that we're going to be losing our balance, rocking, then we're going to leave that support in front of our torso. Dropping both legs into our forearm plank. Fingers wide spread. Elbows slightly forward from the shoulders so that as we shift our weight, we have it in alignment. Knees bent helps us get that hip lifted first before we think about straightening the legs anymore. And again, we can just leave the hand rest on our hip, or we can move it around as we'd like, whatever we feel we need to do. Before we drop back down, working on our shoulder stretch. So the bottom arm is going to have the palm turned up. And we're going to rotate inwardly with that arm so we can stretch it straight out behind us, drop down on that shoulder. Knees together, hips together. Top hand reaching around, maybe just resting on our hip or going even further back. It's okay if that top shoulder pulls back a little bit, not if the hip does. We're trying to keep them even, so we isolate this stretch across the front of the torso, pectoralis muscles, anterior deltoids, particularly on that bottom shoulder. Top hand down to the floor as we push ourselves up. Bend the bottom arm for support for our head as we go into our cat and cow, our sunbird. We're going to get the grip that we'd like on our leg, so it might be just holding onto the side of the leg, but we want to make sure once we've got our hand where we want it, that the knee and the hip are no higher, or the knee and the ankle are no higher than our hip. We start by pushing belly back, rib cage back, rolling chin in toward our knee, and then starting with the sacral spine, lumbar, thoracic, cervical, arching that back, pushing the knee behind us. Nice, slow, steady exhale as we curl into a ball, and arch and stretch the front as we inhale. And the next time we bring that knee behind us, we're going to try and push forward a little bit more with the hips. Try and stretch a little bit more from our navel to our solar plexus to our heart. Trying to pull the shoulder blades a little tighter together as we tilt the chin. And then see if we can't swing that knee further back, extending the leg behind our hip as far as we can to maximize the stretch down the quadricep from the hip to the knee. And bringing our legs together, rolling over on our belly. We did our Sphinx before, and now we're going to do our Cobra. Pretty much the same thing, except this time our weight will be on our hands, lining up our thumbs with our heart and our starfish hands. Same principle, tailbone into the floor, iliac crest lifting, making length before we energize into our hands and come up. We're careful that we're not sagging into the shoulders. We're still doing that shoulder retraction and depression. We're watching the bend in the neck, keeping the hips soft, and then pushing up and back. Coming into our rabbit pose to help loosen up through the back that just did all that work. We're going to drop our forehead down to the floor, keeping our hips lifted high. We can stay down on our forearms. If we'd like, we can bring our hands back toward our feet, but watching that we're not pushing down into our neck. If we'd like, we can bring our rabbit ears up to the sky. And then dropping our hands to the floor, pushing up so that we can swing around and come into a seated pose. We're going to start with our Janu Sirsasana and work a lot on stretching and strengthening muscles, particularly through the thighs. We're going to start by bending up our right leg, keeping our left leg straight, pressing our hands into the floor, making sure that both sit bones on the ground, stretching our spine as tall as we can. And thinking about working with the right leg. The more we tighten the muscles, the more it's going to pull down into the floor. If we let the muscles relax, our knee's going to lift. Tighten the muscles again, let it drop. And lift. Drop, and trying to keep working with those muscles. We're going to try and keep this left foot flexed as much as we can so we continue to work the muscles on the back of the left leg. We're going to line up our midline with the inside of that left leg. Sitting up tall, we do our hip hinge. That anterior tilt that brings our belly down toward our thigh first before we consider how far we want to walk our hands forward. Maybe bringing them hand in front of hand on top of our legs or down on our mat. Maybe eventually reaching our toes or the sides of our feet. Trying to keep that contact of belly and rib cage. If we find it easy to hold onto our feet, then we can think about getting our elbows closer to the floor. We're trying to maximize the stretch through the back. So most of us are going to feel it most intently in the lower back as we come forward. The further forward we can get the hands, the more we work on muscles like trapezius, latissimus dorsi, rhomboids, muscles of the back. The more we can push to the heel of the left foot, the more we get that stretch down the left leg. And we'll slowly sit up. We're going to go into our archer. So we're going to take our hand to our right foot if we can, either on the outside or 2 fingers and a thumb around the big toe. If that's not going to work for us, we can always hold on to the back of the thigh. But we're going to pretend we're pulling on that bow and pull that knee as far as we can underneath our right armpit. We're keeping our midline lined up with our left foot. We're sitting up as tall as we possibly can. We're pulling back, trying to increase the stretch on the hamstring. If we'd like to reach forward with our left hand, we can do so, but not at the expense of twisting through the back. And now we're going into flexion with this right foot. Those of us who have short arms might want to think about using the band. I'm going to show how you can do that on the opposite side, but for now I'm just going to hold on with my hand, lifting that leg, pulling the knee in toward our chest, and then slowly kicking through the heel and getting that leg as straight as we can without locking the knee, without hyperflexing, and pulling that leg closer and closer in toward our rib cage, but at the same time always thinking that scapular retraction and depression. We don't want to be rounding the shoulders at any time. That can create problems for the vertebra. Now continuing to hold on wherever we feel is best on that right leg, we're going to slowly move it out to the side. We can take our left hand and let it just be a counterweight out to the side, bring it to the floor for support, or let it rest on our leg. We just slowly move that leg further and further away from our midline. Then we're going to bring it back. We've been contracting muscles on the outside of the leg and hip and stretching on the inside. Now we're going to reverse that, bringing our foot across over the top of our left leg as far as it will go, over toward that left shoulder. We still have our midline lining up with the inside of our long leg, our left leg. And again, working continuously with our breath. Coming back so that our heel is lining up with our sit bone. We're making sure that our shoulders are directly over our hips. That probably means our foot drops closer to the floor, our arm comes down, and we're going to take this to a twist. So we're going to pulse on our left hip, rotate through the belly, rib cage hard, turn around as far as we can, pulling that shoulder blade in toward our spine so that we're not letting the right shoulder collapse forward. If we'd like, we can lift that right hand, maybe even with our shoulder, maybe lower, as it feels comfortable enough in the stretch. And then slowly coming back, we're going to bend that right knee. We're going to do cradle to baby, so we can take both hands underneath our lower leg if we'd like, or we can take our left hand to our foot and our right hand wrapped around, we can rock the baby in the cradle, trying to get that foot a little bit further out over our left leg each time we move. We want to get more stretch across the outside of the hip into the back of the hip. We can take our right arm, bring it in front, and try and pull that entire leg in tighter toward our torso. But we're still thinking about that scapular retraction and depression. If we feel flexible enough to do so, we can even take that foot into the crook of our left elbow, but we're careful that we're not bending the ankle on itself. And if we'd like, we can take the hand around the outside of the leg. The tighter we can make the space between our leg and our rib cage, the more we're going to get the stretch on the piriformis muscle, that is this one that is just on top of the sciatic nerve. The more flexible it is, the more it will help us prevent sciatica as we age. Then we bring that leg down. We're trying to put the ankle on top of our left leg. We want to make sure it's far enough above the knee that we're not putting any weight into the knee at any time. If this is not comfortable for our knee or for our thigh, we can bring that foot down to the floor, kick it out to the side, bring it out closer toward our toes. We make an adjustment that our body demands, leveraging our hands to our shins so we get our spine as tall as possible. Hip hinge again, and then slowly walking our hands forward, down toward our foot. Thinking again that the best part of our forward fold is that work on tightening the abdominals, tightening the quads, getting the lower back low to the ground first before we reach forward with the hands. And then slowly sitting up, taking this to a twist, pulsing on the side with the long leg, rotating out to the right as we corkscrew from the belly, the rib cage, the heart. We could put our right hand on the floor for support, but if we want a little bit more work through that shoulder, pulling it back a little harder, we can take our right hand, bend the elbow behind us, and see if we can reach our fingers over toward our left arm. Turning and looking out over our right shoulder. If we're feeling any tension in our neck, we might think about taking our left ear and bending it forward toward the left shoulder. And then coming back towards center. Working a little bit more in our core strength, we're going to plant the right foot on the floor to go into our boat, or Navasana. Ardha Navasana, we're only doing one leg this time. Tall spine again. Retraction, depression. Arms holding onto the back of the leg for support if needed, or hands to the sides. We're trying to get our knees and our thighs together. We're not letting that foot drop. If need be, we can bend through the knee, but we don't want to let the upper leg drop any lower to the floor. And then slowly lowering down. We're going to loosen up the muscles of the legs by pulling our heels just a little bit in so we've got a nice gentle bend through the knees. We're going to take the fingertips of both hands and bring it to our left thigh and just pretend we're bouncing a basketball. Letting that leg bounce up and down, muscles relaxing. And we're going to pull that knee in toward our chest, kick our leg straight, bring it down to the floor. Do the same thing on our right leg. Keep the knee nice and relaxed, maybe pulling the heel back a little, and then pressing into that upper leg so we're bouncing up and down. And then pulling that knee in toward our chest before we kick through the heel and come down. And now we're going to do all the same poses on the opposite side. This time I'm going to use the band. I do have some deterioration in my left hip and sometimes some problems with that left knee as well. So using the band helps me get the kind of stretching that I want without pain, without strain. If ever that works for you as well, gives you into the pose better, gives you much more stretch, much more strengthening, feel free to use any prop that you'd like. But this time we're going to do the left leg bent. So if we need to keep the knee higher, that's fine, but if we can, we're going to try and get that heel of our foot as close as we can in toward our sit bone. Planting our hands on the floor to get length through the spine, but both left and right sit bone on the ground. And again, we can tighten muscles as much as possible. Let them relax and notice how the knee comes up. Pressing into our hands, squeezing those muscles. Tensor fascia lata is the one that goes from our iliac crest halfway down the outside of our leg. Sartorius is all the way, same starting spot, across the top of our thigh and hooks up to the inside of our leg below the knee. So they're getting a good workout in these poses. We're going to take this to our Janusirsasana. I can use the band, you can use the band, or we can forget about it. But if we can leverage and get that band as tight as possible. If you're using a band, it can be anything. No need to spend money on a yoga strap. You can use your dog leash, your regular belt. But don't use an exercise band that's really stretchy because you'll lose the point of it if you do that. But we do, as we always do, the same hip hinge. We think about belly down toward our leg. As I come down, because I want to continue to use the band, I'm just going to roll my hands around the band slowly, steadily, until I reach as far forward as I like. I can let go of the band, grab for my foot, recognizing that the slower we go, the further we can get. The muscles are more relaxed, so they increase the flexibility. They also have a better warning system that way to let us know when we're hitting the point beyond which we should not be going. And then slowly releasing and sitting up. I'm going to keep the band handy as we go into Archer, making sure we're seated on both sit bones. We're still continuing to flex through the right leg, lifting up the left foot. And again, if we'd like to use the band, that's fine. I don't find it particularly helpful for this pose, but pulling back that knee, thinking that we're not rounding the back at all. If we want to, we can reach forward with the right hand, but not at the expense of a twist. We keep the shoulders lining up with the hips. And then we're going to go into our leg flexion on that left leg. So now I will use the band, wrapping it around the sole of my foot, pulling it in toward my chest, and then lifting that heel high to the sky. Careful again that we keep that retraction and depression, and slowly working that leg out to the side. We can hold on to our foot, we can hold on to the back of our calf or the back of our thigh, whatever works. Right hand can be a support on the floor, on our leg, or just a counterweight out to the side. And switching, working the muscles in the opposite direction by changing hands if we're using a band, and swinging that leg as far as we can across the right leg over toward the right side. So now the stretch is down here, and then sartorius and tensor fascia lata. Coming back towards center. Making sure we're not leaning back anymore now that we're sitting up nice and straight. Grip of choice on the band or on the foot. As we pulse on the right hip, rotate around to the side as far as we can to get our shoulders lined up with our front legs. Supporting ourselves if we'd like, with hand on the floor, or bringing that hand even with our shoulder. Rotating back towards center. Bending our knee. And going into our cradle to baby, again, grip of choice. If we'd like to, arm around the outside hand, right hand holding onto the foot. And we're thinking about trying to increase that range of motion a little bit more each time. Again, if we'd like, we can take our left arm in front, pull that leg as tight as we can in toward our rib cage. We can adjust our hands so we're bringing the right hand around further, bringing the left arm to the back, trying to get that tightness between our rib cage and our leg so that we can maximize the stretch through those muscles underneath the gluteus maximus. Leg down, either on the floor for a more gentle version or sitting on top of our right leg, but being careful that we don't have the leg so far forward that we're pushing into the knee. So we're trying to wiggle it up as tight as we can in toward our hip hinge. And again, you might want to use the band around the sole of that long leg to be able to get a little bit more of that stretch, especially through the shoulders and the arms. But again, thinking about ideally getting our belly as low as we can in toward our thigh before we worry about the forward reach with the hands. And then slowly sitting up, taking this to a twist. So we pulse on the long leg hip. We rotate through the belly, ribcage, heart. We bring our left hand to sit on the floor as close to our midline as we can, working the muscles of the shoulder so the shoulder doesn't move toward the front. If we'd like, we can take this arm, bend it behind us so that we can bring it even further toward the front, maybe bringing our fingers to rest on the right arm as we pull that elbow back toward our hip. And then slowly releasing, coming forward. Going into our half bow, planting our left foot on the floor. And again, we can hold on to the backs of our thighs. We can bring our arms out to either side. I'm going to continue to hold on to the band. We're thinking always retraction and depression of the shoulder blades. Lifting the leg, we're trying to keep the alignment from the knees down through the hips. If we need to, we can bend that knee, but we don't want to drop the entire leg closer to the floor. Now we're working on getting our abs tighter and tighter up toward our leg so that we can increase the contraction of the abdominals, the quad, increase the stretch of the hamstring, the muscles of the back. And then slowly lowering that leg to the floor. We're going to take this to our inclined plank, working a little bit more on the shoulders, hands, wrists, arms. If we want a more gentle version, we'll bend our knees and plant our feet flat on the floor so we can adjust our weight between our hands and our feet. If we want it more in the upper shoulders, we're going to keep our weight just on the heels of the feet. Either way, we contract the muscles on the back, especially the glutes. We're lifting our hips as high as we can. We're pulling our shoulder blades tight, bend to the neck, whatever feels comfortable. Thinking about opening those fingers as wide as we can, our starfish hands, pressing across the fingers and the thumbs so that we don't have all the weight on our wrists, and then slowly lowering down to the ground. We're going to take this to our Paschimottanasana, our seated forward fold. So again, if we'd like to, we can use the band or not. Starting with our hip hinge as always, coming as low as we can, pushing through the heels to keep the work in the lower legs. Hands slowly coming down. Never letting the hands dangle in space. If we do that, we're putting all the weight of our shoulders and our arms into our lower back. Potential of damage if we do so. So we think about keeping the hands either walking on our legs or on our mat, the floor, until we get to the length that we'd like. And again, if we find this easy, we can easily reach our feet, then let's think about pulling our elbows closer down toward the floor so we're increasing the stretch, especially to the lat, low on our spine, all the way up to the inside of our arm. And then slowly sitting up. We'll come into our full pose. We have possible ways of doing this. One of them is to hold on to the backs of our thighs and bring our arms out to either side, lift both feet together. Another option I'm going to use today is putting my feet nice and flat on the band so that I can do a little bit more pulling my abdominal area, my torso in toward my legs. So lifting our feet, straightening out legs, and again, retraction, depression of the back, but working to decrease the distance between our legs and our torso so that we can increase the strengthening we're doing. And then bending our knees, rolling down to the ground, pulling our knees in toward our chest, our Apanasana. Good for any of us who have digestion problems. And then letting ourselves rock side to side if we want to do a little bit of massage for the spine, the hips, the shoulders. Dropping our feet to the floor. We're going to step our feet a little bit out, side the hips. And we're going to stretch our arms on either side of our shoulders. We're going into knee drop out to the left. Our legs are going to be separated when we come down, and there's no need to get the knees all the way to the floor. We're going to inhale and come back up. Knees directly up toward the sky. Exhale, just slowly dropping them down to the floor. Nice, slow, steady breathing as we lift and lower. Most of us are probably feeling the most intense stretch across the quadricep into that top knee, making sure we're not feeling any strain in the knee. The next time we bring those knees over to the left, we're going to keep them in position. We're going to see if we can get the entire side of the foot. So on the right leg, the back leg, it will be from the big toe down through the heel. On the lower leg, it's going to be from the little toe down through the heel. Try to get them on the ground. Try to see if we can drop the knees a little bit closer. Trying to see what's going on with this stretch through the sartorius, through that tensor fascia lata, through the quadriceps. Now we're going to keep our twist, but we're going to bring our knees and our feet together so we can slide our left foot back a little, our right foot forward a little, till we get knee over knee, foot over foot. And seeing if we can tighten those muscles on the inner thigh a little bit more, get the knees closer to the floor, squeeze the glutes, get the hips a little bit further out toward the left. But now at the same time, we're working the muscles on the right shoulder, upper back, and we're trying to get that shoulder blade pulling tighter and tighter in toward our spine. We can turn and look out over our right shoulder if we'd like. If we're feeling tension in our neck, we can let our head bobble side to side. Whatever we feel need to do to make sure we're feeling relaxed and comfortable. The tighter we can get those knees to the floor, the more we're going to massage those internal organs. And then slowly bringing the knees back up to the sky. We're going to plant our feet flat on the floor. Adjust our hips as we need to make sure our spine is nice and straight. Then walk our feet outside our hips again, and this time we'll drop them out toward the right side. So as we come down, we've got pinwheel legs. Chances are most of us aren't getting that left knee all the way down to the floor. We don't care how low it goes. We only care that we're staying with something that feels like we're working the muscles but not causing any strain. This time we're going to keep the drop out to the right. No need to get the knees all the way to the floor, but it would be helpful to be totally on the sides of the feet, not up on the bottom of the feet. That's going to help us get that stretch around the knees, especially on that back leg. And now bringing legs together. So we're going to slide our feet together, our knees together, let them drop as low as we can. This time we might be able to get the right leg all the way to the floor. We're not concerned if it doesn't want to go that low. But we are working the muscles of the legs, muscles of the hip to get as much rotation through the lower torso to the right at the same time. Working the muscles of the upper torso, especially on that left shoulder rhomboid, pulling that left shoulder blade tight in toward our spine. The more we get that ringing motion, the more blood and oxygen are moving through our internal organs, releasing toxins, the more stress relief we'll get up and down that spine, through the back. And then slowly bringing both knees up. And we'll decide where we'd like to go for our final relaxation. If we just want to spread our feet a little bit further apart, keep the knees up, rotate our palms up to the sky, a comfortable distance from our hip. We can do that if we want to straighten out our legs so that we come into our corpse pose. Shavasana, we can do that. We can curl up in a ball, go to our fetal position. My favorite position, of course, is Viparita Karate because of the circulation in my legs. Usually I use a bolster to get my hips a little bit higher, but for today, I'll just swing my legs up the wall, straighten out my spine, bring my hands out to either side a comfortable distance, releasing the tension in my legs and improving the blood flow, releasing any possibility of swelling in my legs, stimulating thyroid. And as we always do, finding our relaxation by tuning into our breath. Slow, steady, recognizing that thoughts will come, but releasing them anytime they do, as soon as they're there, knowing that we don't have to attend to them now, that we'll get to them in due time. Breathing in tranquility as we breathe out tension. Breathing in harmony as we breathe out hatred. Breathing in serenity as we breathe out stress. And whenever we're ready, we can roll over on our side and come up to a seated position, or we can stay here as long as we'd like.